Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, it's Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and executive director of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit behind this podcast, and Journey to Esquire, the blog, and Journey to Esquire, the scholarship and leadership program. I'm so excited. We have another great guest today. We're going to pass the mic to Jennifer Strouf. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. I was just saying that we've been crossing paths for a while, and we finally got you on the show. So let me tell you a little bit about Jennifer. She's born and raised in Tampa Bay, and it is her home. She graduated from Leto High School, where she was the editor of the feature section of the newspaper and performed with the Falconettes. So people who are in the Tampa Bay area know what all this stuff, the significance of those activities are. She attended the University of South Florida, where she earned a degree in political science with a minor in communications. Then she went on and got her law degree from Stetson University College of Law, practiced law for 3 years, and then returned to the school to earn her Master of Laws in Employee Benefits from the John Marshall Law School in Chicago, Illinois. Her practice took her all over the country before she returned home to focus on defending individuals. Yeah, so we're excited to hear about all of that, Jennifer. And then I actually ran into her because she does some bar coaching for some people that I know. She does some improv, a lot of interesting things. But let's go back in time to when you first started thinking about becoming a lawyer. What made you want to be a lawyer?
I was actually completely convinced I was going to be a psychologist. That was my path. I knew it. I knew it with everything in my heart. And then I was 14 years old, and my dad's friend that he had grown up with in Key West came over with his wife and family. Oddly enough, his wife was a psychologist, and he was a lawyer that prosecuted death penalty cases. So it just so happened my dad, his friend, and I were all in the front room, and we're talking about, kind of life. And then we're talking about, issues of the day. And one topic came up, and I'm like, well, you're wrong, is kind of how the conversation started on my end. And I was 14. So thankfully, I didn't know that I didn't know things yet. But I was passionate, and I was very passionate about this particular subject. So John and I ended up having about a 2.5 hour debate. And at one point, my dad looks at him and goes, "You're on your own. You figure it out." But at the very end of the argument, dinner bell was basically rung. And John looks at me and he's like, "You're going to be a lawyer." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Because at that moment, I'm just angry. But I kept my cool, and I literally argued for 2.5 hours with this person who took on some of the best attorneys in the state of Florida. And I held my own. And he's like, "I'll tell you what, go ask my wife any one of the topics we've covered. And she's going to go, 'And how do you feel about that?' And he's like, 'You can't keep your mouth shut. You're going to be a lawyer.'" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be a lawyer." And kind of from that point forward, I went through, and yes, I was one of those kids where I didn't have parents that were lawyers. We did have the one family friend, but I was one of those kids who was taught because I like to argue I'd be a lawyer. I found out there was more to it, which very unfortunate. But yeah, from 14 forward, I didn't look back. I went straight through college, straight through law school. In retrospect, I wish I'd taken a little bit of time to not burn out, but it ended up working out well. It ended up being the career that I do love. And to this day, there are days that I'm like, am I sure I don't want to like own a farm somewhere? And then I'm like, yeah, no, I like helping people too much.
Yeah. I don't know why people think owning a farm is easy. Like that's hard manual labor, but I guess compared to being stuck in an office, there's something appealing about it.
It seems really nice, but it's kind of like the brief foray I had into bread making, which was very pre-pandemic, where I made my first loaf and I'm like, I'm never going to buy bread again. until it then took me like 4 hours and like $20 to make a pack of hot dogs that ended up uneven and horrible, barely edible. And I'm like, yeah, I better stick to law because that's what I'm good at. Uh, so yeah, nothing but respect for people who farm, etc. But there are days
Yeah.
that it's like, I wish I went and did something else, but
Yes.
99.9%
I-
of the time,
that
I
is
love
the lawyer fantasy. Like I love what I do, but right now I don't want to be doing it. So, but I know you went straight through, but let's talk a little bit about it. So you're at the University of South Florida, you're majoring in communications. By the time you're in your junior year of college, were you pretty certain you were going to apply, and what was that process like for you?
I knew I was going to apply freshman year. I mean, I was headstrong and this is what I was going to do. One of the best things I ever did was I took a Kaplan bar, or not bar prep, LSAT prep. I did it because someone had mentioned that it was good to take an LSAT prep class. And yes, I could have walked in cold and probably done okay, but taking the prep class actually taught me some of the strategies I ended up using on the bar exam. It taught me some of the strategies of thinking. It really helped me apply some of what I was learning and do process of elimination. And I laugh looking back now because everyone always says the LSAT has nothing to do with being a lawyer. And the favorite section they all like to pull out is the games section, which is the section I love the most. But they're like, you never use games as a lawyer. What does that have to do with it? These logic puzzles. And I'm like, well, Jennifer is one lawyer. Jennifer has clients in 3 counties. All 3 clients are scheduled for 8:30 a.m. court. This particular judge is kind of the lowest rank, but he's the one that gets the angriest. This judge always takes a long time, and this one is really nice. And if you have your assistant call, might let you get on Zoom. Where does Jennifer go first thing Monday morning? My life is one of those game problems. I have this many clients to see today, and this one will want to talk. This one has to pick up kids at 3, and this one has a job. Where do you see your clients? So it's funny that the lessons that you got from the LSAT actually do have real world applications, but taking that LSAT prep course, again, because I didn't come from a family of lawyers. I think you have a great advantage when you do, but taking that class helped improve my grades on the LSAT or the scores, so to speak. And because of that, I had more colleges and universities interested in me. I had better scholarship opportunities. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have gone. I obviously, like most people, financed a lot with loans and whatnot. But if I hadn't had that help along the way, I wasn't going to be a lawyer. So
Mhm.
I think the scrimping and saving I did to pay for that class was absolutely worth it. And I think
Yeah,
that
it's funny. I
claim still
took Kaplan
exists.
too, and I felt like it didn't help me at all. So I don't know. I just hated those logic games, and I could not figure them out. But you're right. It is like real life practice, even with like legal analysis, right? This statute says this, but this other statute says something that contradicts, but they don't necessarily override one another. So how do I apply these things? And then there's the state statute and the federal statute, and then there's the civil rules of procedure, and then there's the rules of judicial administration, and all these things
Right.
conflict and impact this one thing. So you really do have to kind of prioritize and see which thing goes which in what order. But yeah, I hated them. But some people love them, and if you love them, then kudos because you'll do well on the LSAT.
It's twisted. I actually bought a book of them. It's part of my relaxation now. But I also sit there and do math problems for fun. Like, I just, I like numbers. I like moving things around. And the big difference is now the numbers are people's freedom. And now the numbers that I move around are calculating days, months, and years of their lives. And it's a bizarre thing that we do sometimes when you really sit there and think about it. I'm like, people come to me and trust me with kind of the worst moments of their life or the scariest. And somehow I'm going to get them through it. So it's kind of cool what we do, but it's weird if you really think about it.
It is. So for your exposure to be to a death penalty lawyer, I think was serendipitous because that is one of the hardest kinds of law to practice. It's a niche practice. Very few people do it because it's so hard. And you literally are talking about life and death with those cases. Um,
Absolutely.
you end up at Stetson. Did you enjoy your time there? And what was that like?
I'll be honest, my first year of law school was hell. And it was awful at the time, not because I didn't enjoy the classes or I didn't enjoy the people. I didn't know how to study, like at all. I felt like I spent way too much time on the wrong things. And I remember getting my first semester's grades and being absolutely devastated. I couldn't even talk to my professors about it because I was so upset. And then I went and did second semester, and I finally got up the nerve to talk to a couple of professors. And my torts professor, Dr. Lake, told me, he's like, you wrote an honors quality paper on the wrong subject. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that process you go through, I didn't understand that law school was somewhere between like a brainwashing and a mental retraining, because you do start to look at things differently. You write in a very different way than you would every day with your friends. And the process you go through that is now 20 plus years later, so second nature, at the time was really hard. And it was hard to take feedback. It was hard to hear that I wasn't perfect at everything right off the bat. And what I think is so funny is, if I hadn't struggled my first year of law school, one of the ways you and I met is I actually tutor the Florida bar exam now. If I hadn't struggled that first year, I wouldn't have learned how to learn differently. And I wouldn't have learned how to teach others and communicate with others. I think one of the most difficult things as a lawyer is to take people's problems in, run them through your brain and figure out what's going on, but then be able to explain it succinctly, easily, in words that both comfort and let people understand what's happening. So what I saw as a failure, honestly, for the first 10 years of my career, it was just so devastating to have not been perfect all along. I realized was actually a great success. And frankly, second year forward, I did great. But it's because I finally accepted the criticism, I accepted the help, and I accepted, okay, I've got to do this different.
So if I can I ask you, it sounds like you've recovered 20 years later, so that people have some perspective, because sometimes students like are devastated over C's, and I'm like, a C is a good grade in law school. So what kind of grades did you have that first semester that left you so devastated?
The first semester, it was bad. It was all C's.
Okay.
Stetson is known for actually being a lower centered school, because certain schools, it's like a B center or A minus center. Stetson was a C centered school. It was truly devastating to not be at the top of my class, which I expected. And what was funny is when my professor spoke to me, they're like, I assumed you were top of the class, but I didn't know you took this weird detour and missed half the question. The criminal law professor actually told me, he's like, you literally forgot the opposing side. And because you forgot the opposing side, you left half of your points on the table. And he's like, you still got a B in my class, which means you wrote such a good paper on half of it that you still scored so many points. Again, it was beyond humbling. It was devastating to me. I really wondered if I should still be a lawyer. I wondered if I was going to be good at this. And I don't know if I was just stubborn or I couldn't see other options at that moment. I applied for an MBA program at that point. I'm like, maybe I made a bad choice, but I knew I wanted it. So whether it was stubbornness, it was not confidence at that moment, I can tell you that, or whether it was just I wanted it enough that I was persistent and pushed through, and then I made it. Again, once I actually let go of my preconceived notions, once I let go of that, I don't need to ask for help, I know how to do this, I did great. I mean, I ended up booking legal writing. I think it was, yeah, legal writing. It was drafting, not the research and writing on that one. It did not go well the first time. Um, we had check minuses, and apparently that's what I made, but I still passed with a check minus. It was truly hard, but again, today you wouldn't know because I teach people how to do all this. And I think sometimes it's okay to struggle. It makes you
It
humble.
is, yeah.
it makes you really assess what you want.
And a lot of law students, because I'm a law professor, they just struggle with that. They're like you. I'm like, listen, you're smart, you can do this, but you're not following the instructions. Like, but I don't like the instructions. It does not matter. You can't go to a judge's courtroom and say, I don't like the way you do it, judge. The judge said, do it that way, you do it that way, right? Unless it is unethical or illegal, you're going to do it the way the judge said. If they said they want 2-inch margins all around, no more than, no less than 16-point font or whatever, that's what you give them. But students like you who have been successful all throughout their academic career, they're like, I can do what I've always done. I'm not listening to these people.
I remember, I think it was my second semester research and writing. I went to the professor about the grade I'd gotten because it was miserable. And she's like, well, you didn't quote this, you didn't quote this. And I'm like, well, I didn't want to be copying what the case said. I mean, that just seems stupid. I'm using their words, not mine. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, that's what the quotation marks are for. And I'm like, but then it's not my writing. And it was such a weird concept for me. And really, I fought it with everything I had, putting the case law and making sure I used case law correctly, but taking those quotes and then using the analysis. I fought IRAC. I know some different law schools now teach CORAC, which is conclusion, issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. I fought it. And what's funny is, again, once I stopped fighting those things, my grades shot up. Judges always tell me what a great paper I wrote. And even for bar tutoring, frankly, I go back to IRAC. If you have to write the word issue, make sure you put the real issue there. Because so many law students, when they go to take a bar exam, will lose points because they forget to put a conclusion. And I'm like, these are not training wheels, they're formulas. And use the formula. That's what you need.
Exactly. Yeah. I
I
do
actually,
a bar prep essay, and I'm like,
mm-hmm.
IRAC. If you literally have to write IRAC down your paper, then do that and make sure you put something next to each one. And they're like, but why? I'm like, why are you fighting me? Why? Why? I've graded them for the bar exam. I'm telling you what they're looking for. Just put it in there. But that's an important lesson for students.
I
This
always
is
give my
different than what you've
students,
done before. So
yeah,
yeah.
when it comes to essay writing and grading, I always tell my students, we go on like this little journey where I'm like, okay, I want you to close your eyes. Picture yourself 15 years from now. You're a great attorney, and now you're going to be grading these essays for the bar. And there's 2,500 students that took this bar times 3 essays times 2 graders per essay. You've already worked a full day. And now you're sitting down with your first sip of Merlot, trying to get through all of these essays on people who are desperate to prove they know what's going on. And I'm like, what does that person want? They just want the answer. And you know what? If you put IRAC, it's not cheating. It's telling them, hey, there are points right here. You can give them to me right now because I know how to do it. And I'm like, they don't want your new brilliant take on this. They don't want Shakespeare or iambic pentameter. They want the answer. And I really tell myself all the time, it's proficiency, not perfection.
Yes.
If we were perfect, we would call it the perfect law or the perfection of law, but we don't. It's the practice of law. Although most of us are frankly obsessed type A personalities who want to be
Yes.
perfect, but that's
Yes, that's the other
that's
thing
just
about
what we
law
have to
students.
do.
Yeah, law school tends to attract a lot of type A personalities. So that's another reason why it's so stressful because we want to be perfect. And I always tell them progress over perfection.
Absolutely.
Progress. So, what did you end up practicing and how did you get into that practice area when you graduated from Stetson?
I ended up a criminal defense attorney. I went to law school to be a prosecutor. I mean, literally, that was day one. I'm like, I'm going to prosecute. And any prosecutor who's ever been up against me who watches this is going to crack up at the fact that I wanted to prosecute. I ended up taking the public defender clinic my last year at Stetson. And I honestly did it so I know how to beat the other side. And then they had me. I just, I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the camaraderie. Even 20 years into it, when I've had problems with clients in other states, or I've had problems with whatever else, I pick up a phone, I call anyone at a public defender's office, or I speak to anyone who's been a public defender. And it's almost like we have a secret society. They immediately help me. I was in the middle of a homicide trial about 2 years ago, and we had this bizarre issue come up that I had never seen in the middle of the trial. One of the witnesses actually from the stand threatened to kill my client, but he did it through gestures. And I go home that night because the judge like recesses and she's like, I'm giving you guys so many hours, get back here. I put out a thing on a Facebook post and I emailed some of my public defender friends and I'm like, this just happened. What do you think? Do you know an expert? Do you know anyone? And the number of people who texted me, who emailed me, there were people who actually interviewed experts for me and tried to help me find this person. And we actually found an expert in the middle of a trial to testify, and he did. And I think it's part of the reason we were so successful at trial. But
Wow.
law is practiced in a vacuum. Having this camaraderie with people is wonderful. Not to say that prosecutors don't have it. I'm just saying, once I went defense, the only time I ever stepped away from defense is I did get an LL.M in employee benefits. I wanted to do ERISA and fight for employee benefits law and deal with people whose pensions had basically been ripped off. And I had fun with it for a few years, but that wasn't where my heart was. I just kept yearning to go back in front of a jury and really represent individuals on a very individual basis. So I went back and did public defense for a while and then accidentally opened a law firm.
We're going to get to that in a minute. But I've heard that about public defenders and former public defenders. And I think part of it too is prosecutors do have camaraderie, but there's not really private prosecutors, right? Unless you're like some fancy person who's going to be called in for the White House for a special appointed as special counsel. That's not a thing.
Yeah,
But even
prosecutors get in trouble
prosecutors,
if they're taking extra money on the side, they get in trouble for
yeah,
lying.
they can't. Yeah. And then so when you leave, your options are, if you want to stay in criminal laws, to do defense. So it just becomes this big club of defense attorneys. And it's hard work, It's like you said, individuals' lives, time, freedom, liberty is on the line, even for minor things. Because people don't realize, like, you take away someone's driver's license, then they're going to lose their job, then they're going to lose their home. Like, this stuff cascades. But yeah, I can definitely see the allure. I went to law school because all I wanted to do was be a criminal defense attorney like Matlock and Perry Mason. And that's the one thing I've never done. So
Oh no.
I know I went to the prosecutor's office for my externship and I did have an offer, but I had an offer from a firm. And this was like 2008-ish, 9 housing bubble. And so
Yeah.
I went with the firm, but now I teach criminal law. So I'm like, that's my redeeming, job, teaching criminal law and constitutional law because I'm passionate about that. So accidentally opened up a law firm. Okay, so we know how you got into criminal law and you did ERISA for a while. How do you accidentally open up a law firm?
Well, first I made the mistake of turning 40. That was just, I didn't plan on that, but it snuck up on me anyway. I had a bunch of friends come and they did a surprise party. And we were all talking that night. They're like, he had 6 months to live. What are you going to do? And I'm like, going to Europe. And they're like, aren't you going on vacation in a few weeks? And I'm like, no, I'd go. I'd like stay there for a few months and just really do all of these different things. And they're like, well, then why don't you do that? It's like, well, I've got cases, I've got trials. And they're like, well, there's always trials. So on Monday morning, I quit my job and told my boss I'm going to Europe. You gave typically 30 days notice. It was 31 days before my plane left. So I went to Europe for a while, came back. I'd been getting into improv a lot at the time. And I suddenly thought, you know what? I'm going to open up improv for lawyers. I'm going to teach lawyers how to try cases by using improv skills and applying those techniques to client communication. And I was sitting there and I was basically writing up this plan of how I was going to present these continuing legal education courses. And a couple people were like, hey, can you cover some cases for me? And then, I ended up getting someone that called and they're like, do you want to represent me? And I'm like, well, yeah, that sounds fun. But I guess I probably need a law firm for liability, for taxes. So I opened up the law firm and then I suddenly started getting clients. And I'm like, oh, I guess I opened a law firm. And it actually took me a year before I acknowledged I had a law firm. And by then I had almost, 70, 80 clients. And I was actively representing all these people. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I opened a law firm. But it's been great. I love the practice. I love being able to self-direct. I love being able to jump in second chair with some friends, or I've also taken people kind of under my wing and they'll come sit second chair for me to get some more experience. But yeah, accidentally opened a law firm. I highly recommend it. Although if you can, maybe plan the accident at least a month in advance. I was going to say it was at that same time a friend called me and said, I know you've taught classes before and I know you've done stuff. My friend is struggling with the bar. Do you think you could help her? And I'm like, sure, I can try. And it was her, I think, third time taking the bar exam. And I broke it down for her the way I had broken it down for myself. And she suddenly not only passed, she passed with like lots of points to spare. And then she recommended a friend. So 5 years ago, I started tutoring the bar exam, and now I've got two people who've become partners at their law firm after multiple fails. I have someone, it was her sixth time when she worked with me, and she just opened her own law firm on purpose. She actually planned, got the building, all of that fun stuff. Another one just settled a case for, 7 figures. And it's neat to see that not only are these students going and passing the bar, but now they're thriving. And I tend to work with people who are either out of state, which has like a super low passage rate, or people who have somewhere between third and sixth time taking the bar. And yeah, it's been great. And I love seeing all these people go out because I can only try so many cases. So knowing that
Yeah.
there are these other great attorneys out there is really a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, that's what's like being a professor. Like, okay, I don't get to be the great defense attorney that I dreamed of, but I am helping to create some, right? And I have several of my students who are at the public defender's office just doing awesome work. More students on the way who want to do that. And I always tell students, listen, I know you guys have an idea of what you want to do. All I ask is that you keep an open mind, especially criminal law. Everyone's like, I don't want to take this class. I don't want to be a criminal. And I'm like, well, it's on the bar, so you might as well like learn something while you're here, right? And just keep an open mind. And I have some students now who are like, I love it.
Well, I
They're
was
like, this
telling
is
you
all I
one
want to
day,
do. Yeah.
maybe summer or sometime when you're off, give me a call. If I've got a bunch of cases going to trial, I'll have you sit second chair. The defense attorney dream can live on.
I'll consider that because I haven't been back in the courtroom in a while. Yeah. So, oh, you put me on the spot. Look at that. That
Uh-oh.
doesn't usually happen.
Wait a second. Whose
But
podcast is it?
I know. So I have a lot of our listeners or young people who are thinking, hey, I want to open up my own firm.
Mhm.
And usually we get the opposite story. Man, no one would hire me, so I opened a firm and I struggled for years to get this. And so what do you think happened that you just so organically got these clients?
One, I mean, by that point, I've been practicing 15 years. So it's not, I mean, most of those have been either in a private firm or the public defender's office. It's word of mouth. Even to this day, I don't really advertise. And I get everything from traffic tickets to human trafficking, from misdemeanor battery all the way up to homicide. It's people knowing you. Frankly, a lot of my best referrals come from other lawyers because while we will all have multiple iterations of our career, like you are a prosecutor, then a professor, we all kind of change different bits over time. You find very quickly there are certain things you will not practice. I attempted family law exactly twice and never again. Bless the people who do it. It's not me. I will not handle other certain types of law because it's so complex that the amount of time it would take for me to competently represent the person, I have wasted months of my life. So when you do that, you start to meet people and make friends and find lawyers you would trust. And invariably, because you're a lawyer, people will come to you and go, I have this situation. Can you do this? And then you're like, no, 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 I don't do that. And they're like, do you know someone? So meeting other people and having that rapport with other people. I have former prosecutors who've referred people to me, which I take as like a huge compliment. But that referral network, even your own family network, I swear my mother should just carry my business cards all the time, or possibly have my daughter's a lawyer tattooed on her forehead or possibly on a shirt, because
I
she's
have it on a
the one.
shirt.
Like, oh, that's a good idea.
I made it for my
Uh,
mama. Yeah. But don't mess with me. My daughter's a lawyer. She loved that t-shirt.
that's okay. My dad loves to tell his friends, oh, my daughter's going to be in jail today. And I'm like, do you tell them I'm a lawyer? And he's like, sometimes. Okay, dad, that's fine. But yeah, different parents, different things that they get excited about. But, and once you get a client or two, and once they really trust you, they tend to really trust you, and they will come back, or friends will come back. And yeah, you get repeat business. Sometimes it's not the exact same type of thing, but you do have a lot of people come back.
Yeah, especially with criminal issues. They might not necessarily be committing multiple crimes, but they might have multiple charges. They might have a thing with their license. They might have, expungement, all kinds of things that are related to maybe the one issue that brought you to them in the first place. And it sounds like the same with the bar prep. You just word of mouth. Do you have like an application system, or where do people go to get
Um,
information about that?
Typically, people reach out to me because I am working on a website. Hope to have one next year, but I've been busy with so many trials back to back, it just hasn't happened. I limit the number of students I'll work with, first of all, because during season, I tend to tutor about 30 hours a week, but that's a very limited number of students. I also have things where they can call me day of. I've had people call me before, in the middle, and after, and I'm calming them down, or we're talking about things that happened. So a lot of lawyers, frankly, refer. I've had different law firms that have had paralegals that went to law school, and they'll pay for them to get me, and that's wonderful. It's really nice. And then people will sometimes reach out to me through Facebook. And typically, what I do is I sit down and talk to a person, and I'm like, listen, this is my style. This is what I think works when I teach it. And this is how I teach it. Because some coaches are coaching kind of like the mental aspect of it, or, make sure you've done your studying today. And they're really taking care of that mental health part of it. I do some of that, but a lot of what I'm focusing on is I teach 20 something areas of law to proficiency, and then I teach the pattern of the test. So there's ways to dissect different questions, but not an application per se, but people talk to me typically about 15, 20 minutes on the phone, and we'll see if we're compatible. I've also told students while they sign a contract, if they don't like me after the first lesson, I'll refund the remainder of the money. And no one's taken me up on it yet. But there are some students I have told them, number one, you're not ready. Like, I had a student one time, they're like, okay, well, I can study about a half hour on Tuesdays, and I can give you about an hour one other time a week. And
Yeah,
then maybe I can
no.
do this in 2 hours. And I'm like, no. I'm like, honestly, if I had to take the bar again and I tutor it, I would need more than 2 to 3 hours of studying per week. And I'm like, I'll be quite honest with you, you're going to fail. That's not enough time. And if you need to be on that schedule, you're going to need to start like 9 months in advance, because you're going to have to build slowly. So that's happened a couple times where people just honestly didn't have the schedule. And then there are times I've told people, I'm like, you're not ready this season. I highly recommend you delay one more session, because it's really mentally devastating to fail the bar. And I got to tell you, it's the dirty little secret that no one talks about. Some of the best lawyers I know failed more than once. And I'm talking people that, if you got a group of 100 lawyers, you'd never guess that was the person who didn't pass. So you have to kind of take that out of it. It's not that you're not a good person. It's not that you're not going to be a good lawyer. It's just a test. So,
Yes. I always tell students it's not how many times you fail it, you only got to pass it once.
right.
So it doesn't matter how many times you fail it, just pass it that one time. And I do the bar coaching as well, but I do more of the mental aspect that you were talking about as opposed to the tutoring part. Because most of the time they have some materials that, I show them how to like engage with the material, but I'm like, you paid thousands of dollars for this thing, use it. I'm for the mental part. But
Right.
yeah, just like you said, you have to sit down and talk to them. This is what I do. You have to commit. And I'm not going to mention who I know who used you, but it's someone I know who I had coached first and did not listen to me. So then I found out to the grapevine. That's how I first came across your name. I'm like, and I'm looking for a website, and it's like I just found you on LinkedIn and followed you. I was just like, what? How do people even find this woman? So I was like, okay. So I heard from through the grapevine that, because I wanted to know what did she do differently than what I did. And the person was just very honest. They were like, "Oh, I paid, so I listened." And when they held me accountable, I just made because I was doing it for free through the school
Right.
as a service, and they realized they weren't taking it seriously. Because I'm like, what was the magic sauce? There was no magic sauce. They paid for it. Now they took it more seriously. It's their third time, right? So just a message to all of you who are looking for a shortcut, it does not exist. If I knew what the shortcut was, or anybody did, we'd be making a lot of money selling it.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, if I knew how to make people pass by only studying 3 hours a week, I would not only shut down the law firm, I'd be making millions because, you spend hundreds of thousands on your legal education and you take all that time. And if someone had you a guaranteed way, I know they'd write a check for it. But no, I mean, there are things that you can break down differently. And I've confirmed with people, I'm like, you've never seen it broken this way before because there are a limited number of patterns. I love
Yes,
MBE because we know what 7 topics are there. It's
yes,
done. It's 7 topics. And even within those topics, the formula of approximately 30% are going to be hearsay questions of evidence.
right.
There's going to be things on constitutional law about what level of scrutiny you do. And
Yeah,
it's going to even be in the same pattern every time.
yes,
So if you can't get that down and you can't really embrace that, you're going to have a hard time with this test. And almost like law school, I stopped trying to fight it because
yes,
you can't look for the right answer, especially in Florida. Florida, it is often the least wrong multiple choice answer.
yes. Students
I
hate the least wrong answer.
The least wrong
But I'm
answer.
like, it's part of the multiple choice strategy. Sometimes you're just eliminating the other ones and finding if there's one left, that's it. But they're like, no, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, so what are you gonna do? Pick another random one? Doesn't make.
Right.
So and they're
And
fighting it
it's
exactly. So
Florida is a reading comprehension test. I tell
it
people all
is.
the time,
Yes.
if
Yeah.
you are not sitting there, because they're deceptively short questions
Yeah.
compared to MBE, and you got the same amount of time. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, no, you
Yeah.
can't.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting because I've worked for the Florida Board of Bar Examiners, graded essays, written multiple choice questions. I tell students that, and they still don't believe that what I'm telling them is how it works. And I'm like, well, I'm not fighting with you about it. But so students, check out Jennifer Strouf, look her up on LinkedIn. We'll have the link in there. She only takes a limited amount of students. So if you're looking at the next bar after you hear this episode, reach out right away. So now let's talk about diversity because, of course, we're Diversity Access Pipeline Inc. Before we started, we were talking a little bit about just a lot of things, right? You said you were really interested in diversity early on. What got you interested in issues of diversity in the law?
The organization still exists. It's called Community Tampa Bay. They put on a summer program. It's like a week or so long sleepaway program for future leaders, as how it was sold to me. And their mission is a world free of discrimination. And it really got me empowered. It got me feeling like this is what I want. And I did that at age 15. And then I became a counselor for them and an advisor later down the road. And just looking at and understanding different points of view. Like when I was 15, the big word was tolerance. And we're like, yeah, we've got to get that out of our mouth and out of our thought process, because how horrible would it be to walk up to someone and go, I tolerate you? You'd be like, excuse me. And even understanding is hard. I try to look at it as I don't know what this person has been through. And, all I can know is what I don't know, or be willing to be open minded and listen to the different stories. I mean, if you think about it, I walk in and tell people to not only trust me with their life now, but trust me with the family secrets, to trust everything that's ever gone on in your life, and literally tell me the worst things, because that may be the mitigation. That may be the mental health link I need. And I think recognizing that I didn't have the same life they did, whether it's because of, economics, color, ethnicity, gender, being willing to listen to people and just take that time really does help. But I've seen it over the years. I was very early on interested in student education and admission to the bar, and I've twice served now as the chairperson of that committee for the bar. So did at least 12 years, I think it was, on it. We are a pretty homogenous group as lawyers. Even now, we don't have a lot of diversity. And I recognize if I was in trouble, I have kind of a whole list of amazing female lawyers I would go to first. And it's because I would trust them and I'd feel different with them. And I think we need to have law expand and allow people to have a secure pipeline through. But it's intimidating, especially if you don't have generations of people behind you. I know tons of lawyers who have parents who are lawyers, grandparents who are lawyers, and it just seems to be something you pass down. But being the first person out the gate to do that, I mean, my dad graduated college when I was 17. The joke was he going to graduate before I graduated? But being the first person in my family to take that jump to law school, and now I've had cousins and friends and other people who've gone in. I think it's important to have everybody have a seat at the table, because otherwise we don't know what we're missing.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't know what you're missing. Some people just look around, well, why should we automatically have this group or that group or that? Because we don't know what that group is dealing with. And if there's no one here with a voice, we'll never get around to it. But you said you've been practicing law 20 years, so even that's changed for women in the last 20 years. What are some of the like? What was your impression 20 years ago when you were a woman in law school and looking for jobs and things like that versus now?
I I have been on job interviews where they asked me about my fertility plans. And they asked in a really interesting way. The one I remember the most was they said, is there any aspect of your life or a person who might interfere with your being available to us at any time, including all of a sudden we need you to work till 2 a.m?
Wow.
And I'm like, I have a cat. And, I think me today would probably use some very choice words that I've learned working with people in the criminal justice system for years. But I think I would confront that problem very differently right now. But yeah, I've had several times where either I was made to feel differently because I was the only woman in the room, or, well, she can take care of this. And sometimes it's really stupid, silly things. Like, I dreaded anytime I heard the phrase, well, it always just works out in a meeting, because anytime it always just works out, it meant I was about to go through pure brute force to make this work out. Even things as simple as like the secretary's lunch or other little things, appreciation days. It's
Yeah.
different. And I did have a distant relative who introduced me to Falls when I was still in school. And I spoke with one of the other women in Falls, and she said, I can't believe you actually want to be a lawyer. And this is a woman who graduated and got her law degree like 1980, 1970 something. And I'm like, well, yeah, I want to be a lawyer. And she's like, it was the place I thought I could get into. And she's like, but I've hated it. I've always hated it.
Wow.
And she always felt like she was on that outer edge and not actually included. And
Can you
it's
tell
just
us what falls is?
uh Florida Association of Women Lawyers. By the way, you
Okay,
don't
yeah.
actually have to be a woman to be a member.
All the affinity groups, right? I mean, we were excluded for so long. We didn't create a new group to exclude other people, right? So
Right.
the Asian bar, everyone's allowed. The black bar, whatever version of the bar, Caribbean bar, this, everyone is allowed to join. They just have a focus on a particular group, not exclusion. So just want to put that out there. That's one of my pet peeves, because this whole idea of this reverse discrimination just because we're putting focus on certain groups who
Right.
are marginalized and outright excluded for centuries,
Absolutely.
right? This is not about exclusion, it's about focus to create the pipeline, like you talked about. And that's why we exist during the Esquire, right? We're like, listen, like you said, it's really hard and intimidating. So Jordan Esquire is like, we will help be your guide throughout this. When you have no one to ask a silly question to, we're the ones you come to. You know, when you just need someone to help guide you through something, call your mentor, and this person will walk you through. We've literally had people just like you said, talk to people on the day of the bar exam, like meet them there, make sure they show up.
Yeah. And I think, like you just mentioned, mentorship. And I think some people get very intimidated by it. I know I did when I was first in law school. I'm like, well, I don't need a mentor. I can do this myself. That's not what it is. I ended up accidentally, again, I'm very lucky sometimes, but I've accidentally found these mentors along the way, and men, women, other people who I just trust enough with my question. And there are going to be ups and downs all through college, through law school, and even the practice. You need at least one or two people that you can call and be like, I don't even know what to do with this. And it doesn't need to have that formal title. It doesn't have to be your assigned person. It doesn't have to be anybody else. I've had people now that I've been around so long who've asked, will you mentor me? And I'm like, well, just call me. Yeah. It's not a problem, but don't think you have to do it formally. And frankly, if someone has said they'd be your mentor, if it's me and I haven't called, trust me, you can call 5 years later and this person is still going to help you. I had a problem recently and I actually called someone up that I'd worked with 5, 7 years ago and said, can you just listen? And he's like, absolutely. And he did. And I got great advice. So, not asking for advice is actually the bigger problem. Don't think that you're going to appear weak. Don't think it's going to appear like I don't deserve to be here because I'm having to ask questions. That is how you deserve to be there. Ask questions, figure it out.
Yes, yes, but it's a tough thing to overcome because of all the, stuff happening in the background, in our minds, in the community, right? Or, as a professor, I try not to recreate that kind of paper chase style classroom where everyone's just petrified of being called on, but students are still scared and they still stumble. And I look at them like, I told you which case in advance. How are you this nervous? But it's just intimidating, right? And so just want to encourage our listeners, if you don't know who to call, just call me, Jocelyn Hardrick. info@journeyesquire.com. Call Jennifer. Call any of our guests. They're so happy. They would love to. That's why they put their information in the show notes, and you can reach out to them. And so, any last plug you want to give for your improv for lawyers? Are you still doing that, by the
Yes, kind of asterisk with COVID and where it went. I kind of had to put it on the back burner for a little bit, but we do have some courses that are going to come up this year. I'll be doing something with ethics. I'll definitely be doing trial skills again. And so if you're a lawyer and you want more and kind of a way to learn some of those soft skills of how to speak to clients and juries, we're going to be doing that very soon. That is improv4lawyers.com, strouflaw.com. If you or anyone you know plans on being arrested or unfortunately is arrested, it's a great place to call. We're happy to talk to you anytime. And then for people who are still in law school, getting ready for the bar, if you need anything, I've definitely talked to people before, even when they're like, I can't afford you, but if I could, I would. I'm still happy to talk to you for a little bit of time and just give you a little insight. Because again, I don't think this is something where we want to stop the influx of lawyers. More lawyers to me means a better product for everyone. I think there's plenty of work. I don't think ChatGPT is putting us out of business. I think there's always going to be someone who needs something explained beyond what a computer can do, and frankly needs someone's hand to hold in a courtroom. So give me a call if you need help. And I have one person left for February, and I've already actually got some of my July roster. So if you've got the
way?
bar coming up, give me a
Wow.
call soon.
Yeah. So we're filming this a few months before it's going to air. So she is in high demand, but I can't recommend her more because, like I said, I've known a lot of people, and I know some of those people who have the six-figure settlements and things now, who it was their third and fourth try. And
Mhm.
you're working with people who are the least likely to pass because once you fail, every time you fail the bar exam, you're much less likely to pass. And like you
Right.
said, out of state people who went to school outside of Florida are much less likely to pass as well. So that's a great testament to your teaching skills Even though you don't do that mental, I'm sure that mental one does come up a lot because especially when you're a repeat taker. But that's a great testament to your skills.
Thank you. Well, it was such a
All right.
pleasure to be here. I love all the work you guys are doing on Journey to Esquire. I've just been amazed by you every time I've talked to you. So really, it was a pleasure to be on. And I'm so glad you made time for me.
Yeah, same here. It was great talking to you. We could talk forever about the bar stuff, it seems like. But we'll stop here and we'll see you guys next time on Journey to Esquire. Thanks for tuning in to another great episode of Journey to Esquire, the podcast. Support, share, subscribe. And for more, visit www.journeytoesquire.com.